People in Japan are observing the 4th anniversary of the March 11, 2011 earthquake and tsunami. The disaster devastated the country's northeast and triggered a meltdown at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. A magnitude 9.0 earthquake unleashed waves more than 10 meters high. The tsunami caused extensive damage along the Pacific coast. Nearly 18,500 people were killed or went missing. At least 3,200 others have died because of indirect effects such as illness or stress while living as evacuees. About 230,000 people were still living in temporary housing as of February. The government plans to build about 30,000 public housing units, but only 19% have been completed so far. Dismantling the crippled Fukushima Daiichi plant is one of Japan's biggest burdens. Workers with operator Tokyo Electric Power Company are struggling to deal with a buildup of radioactive water at the complex. TEPCO executives plan to clean up the tainted water by the end of March, but they say they won't be able to keep to this schedule. Authorities estimate it'll take up to 40 years to decommission the plant. There are concerns about possible delays. The most difficult task will be removing the melted nuclear fuel. The central and local governments plan to complete the decontamination work for mainly residential areas by March 2017. But the survivors fear public interest in the issue will decrease over time.
The accident in Fukushima is just one of the legacies of the March 2011 disaster. People in Japan will mark the anniversary of the earthquake and tsunami this Wednesday. More than 15,000 people died and about 2,600 others are still listed as missing. Fukushima Daiichi suffered 3 meltdowns and it was hit by 3 hydrogen explosions. Radioactive contamination forced tens of thousands of people to leave their homes. Evacuation orders are still in effect for large areas. Work is underway to decommission the plant, but experts say the process will take 30 to 40 years. The operator of the facility has made some progress, but it continues to face setbacks. NHK World's Noriko Okada reports.
You could say we've made a big step toward decommissioning the reactors, but we have to be even more careful as the work progresses.
In December, work was completed to remove spent fuel from the number 4 reactor building. The material needs to be cooled continuously in order to remain safe. This is being done in a separate building since the number 4 building was damaged by hydrogen explosions. The next step will be to remove fuel from the buildings where reactors suffered core meltdowns. An even more challenging task is removing molten fuel. It is believed to have dried and hardened. Researchers are still trying to find a way to remove it.
This is a huge challenge. We have to combine techniques in ways that we have never tested before. Some combinations will work, but in other cases we will have to make fundamental adjustments.
The decommissioning process is already behind schedule. Problems involving radioactive water were the biggest cause of delays. Last month, TEPCO executives announced that contaminated rainwater has leaked into Pacific Ocean. They admitted that they knew about the situation as early as last April. TEPCO's response infuriated local fishermen.
We are truly very sorry for the worry and trouble we've caused the fishing industry.
Why didn't you tell us honestly about what was going on when you knew about it since last year? We can't trust you anymore.
Another problem is groundwater that mixes with highly radioactive water that is injected inside the crippled reactor containers. Every day, about 300 tons of contaminated water accumulates at the facility. TEPCO has set up nearly 1,000 storage tanks. But once they fill up, there will be little space to add more. Contaminated water isn't the only issue. Heaps of black bags sit on the side of roads. They hold radioactive soil and other waste collected during decontamination work. The piles of waste have slowed down the entire rebuilding effort. leaders in Fukushima allowed the central government to begin building the storage facilities. Officials in Tokyo hope they will start receiving shipments of waste this month. All told, the government plans to build intermediate storage sites over 16 square kilometers. But so far, it has received permission to use only the 2 sites. Their small size means they will be able to hold only 1/10 of 1% of the accumulated waste. Government officials have been negotiating with over 2,000 landowners in a bid to buy more land. As of now, none of them have agreed to sell. Noriko Okada, NHK World.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has reiterated his commitment to rebuilding northeastern Japan. People in the area are still trying to recover from the powerful earthquake and tsunami and the nuclear accident. Abe spoke on the eve of the 4th anniversary of the disaster.
We will mark the 4th anniversary of the earthquake tomorrow. I would like to express my heartfelt condolences for the people who lost their lives in the disaster.
Abe said the government will draw up a new 5-year plan for a reconstruction. It will be implemented next April.
The intensive reconstruction period ends in March next year. We will create a new framework to help rehabilitation by this summer. The members of my cabinet share the view that each one of us is responsible for reconstruction. I have just ordered my ministers to unite their efforts to create a plan based on that spirit. The government will continue to do all it can to support reconstruction efforts, so each and every person in the affected area can look forward to a bright future. We will help revitalize local industry and the economy. We want to make the area a center of advanced technologies and industries, such as robotics and renewable energy. We will help people who have been affected by the Fukushima nuclear accident. We will expand our aid so they can restart their lives and their businesses. We intend to compile a set of measures in a few months to revitalize Fukushima. And we will show you our vision of how we want Fukushima to be in the future.
The accident at Fukushima Daiichi poses another challenge. Abe said the government will lead efforts to ensure safe, long-term storage of nuclear waste.
We should not pass the burden of nuclear waste onto future generations. The government will take the initiative in finding ways to store nuclear waste. We might review our plan and propose a new scheme based on the latest scientific data.
More than 18,000 people died or went missing in the quake and tsunami. Over 3,000 have died because of indirect effects such as illness or stress while living as evacuees. Earlier, our senior political commentator, Masaya Nakajima, joined me in the studio to share his insight on Abe's news conference. Masaya, it looks like Abe is really serious about revitalizing northeastern Japan.
That's right. Abe revealed a plan that will relieve the anxiety of local governments and residents. He said that government will create a new framework for 5 more years of reconstruction. The government had initially designated the first 5 years after the disaster as a period of intensive reconstruction. But that time ends next year, and there's still a lot to be done. Local government officials and residents are worried about what happens next, and they expected the government to re-examine how to proceed with reconstruction beyond the first 5 years. Abe said that new plan starts in fiscal 2016.
Prime Minister Abe is also faced with the challenge of dealing with managing nuclear waste.
That's right. Abe said that Japan has a certain amount of highly radioactive waste already. He said it is the government's responsibility to take the lead in finding a permanent disposal site for contaminated waste. He said the government will propose possible places for the sites using scientific evidence to determine safety.
Now, talking about safety, Abe was also asked about leaking radioactive water that wasn't disclosed for months.
Local residents and people from the fishing industry criticized the operator of the Fukushima Daiichi, that is Tokyo Electric Power Company, for hiding the issue. Prime Minister Abe echoed that sentiment. He said it was regrettable that TEPCO did not reveal the problem to local people in the area. He said TEPCO needs to regain the trust of the people by communicating more information. He said that he demanded TEPCO to take additional measures to control the flow of the contaminated water. And he said that the government will take the lead in decommissioning of the nuclear power plant and managing the contaminated water.
The head of a nuclear energy organization in Japan is calling for more transparency in the industry while pointing to the Fukushima Daiichi accident.
Our industry had a closed nature before the accident. I think that unwillingness to acknowledge the issues and lack of an open, vigorous debate was a serious problem.
Fujita spoke to reporters on the eve of the 4th anniversary of the accident. She said the group of nuclear researchers and experts want to ensure a disaster like the one at Fukushima never happens again. Last year, the society set up a committee to study the decommissioning of reactors at Fukushima Daiichi. Members plan to make independent proposals on ways to decommission the plant and improve the safety of nuclear power generation.
Tens of thousands of protesters rally against nuclear power outside Japan's parliament. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe hopes to restart Japan's nuclear industry soon, 4 years after it was halted by the Fukushima nuclear accident triggered by a massive earthquake and tsunami.
The government is not committed to handling the situation in Fukushima. They keep hiding things and not sharing information with the public. The governmental support to the victims in Fukushima is not enough.
It was the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl, contaminating water, food, and air and forcing thousands to flee. Since then, Japan has had to import expensive fossil fuels to replace atomic power. Polls show that roughly 2/3 of Japanese oppose relaunching their nuclear power plants.
People in Japan are taking time this week to look back on a day that caused so much hardship and heartache. The 4th anniversary of the March 11th earthquake and tsunami is on Wednesday. Business owners in one northeastern city know firsthand how tough it's been to rebuild. The sea swallowed their shops, and since then, they have had to move from place to place as the reconstruction effort progressed. NHK1's Mikiko Suzuki has the story.
About 20 restaurant and shop owners operate in this temporary mall in Kesenuma's Shishiori district. Kenichi Shiota is one of them. His original restaurant and his house were swept away by the tsunami, and he doesn't yet feel established in his new noodle shop.
It's been 4 years, but this is still the situation we're faced with. I would not call this revitalization. It's more like restoration.
This is Shishiori 3 days after the disaster. The earthquake caused the ground to sink, and the tsunami swept away everything in its path. Shiota led efforts to open the first temporary shopping mall soon after the disaster. He organized fellow business owners from the district. At the time, this boat represented Shishiori. Many visitors traveled to see the 60-meter-long fishing vessel that was swept inland by the tsunami. But residents didn't want to be reminded of the disaster, so the boat was taken away in 2013, and the number of visitors decreased. Land elevation work has been carried out in this district since 2011. Last September, the temporary mall had to be moved ahead of the start of construction. The new location is far from homes and schools, so there are few customers. But Shiota and the other shop owners can't settle here either. They'll have to move yet again next year.
We all want to run our shops here in our hometown. But we may have to choose between going out of business and leaving this town.
Land elevation work begins with the removal of debris. Next, old water and gas pipes are taken out. Then, drains are put in to prevent liquefaction, and the ground level is raised by piling up dirt. Finally, new infrastructure is installed. The work is expected to take another 3 years. Keiichi Kato and his wife Katsuko are also facing an uncertain future. For more than 40 years, they ran a vegetable and flower shop, but they lost it in the disaster, along with their house. Now, there is no one to take over their business, and they can't borrow money from banks because of their age.
I don't know how things will go in the future. I'm old, and I'm worried.
Even if I'm asked to leave, I won't have anywhere else to go.
Kato and his wife now live in temporary housing. They are torn between reality and their wish to rebuild their own shop after the ground elevation work is completed.
I'm keeping myself busy with work and trying to ignore my worries. I just try to take each day as it comes. That's all I can do.
Even after 4 years of anxiety, shop owners in Shishiori are still struggling to map out their future. Mikiko Suzuki, NHK World, Kesenuma.
The debate over a possible nuclear deal with Iran has reached a new level in Washington after a group of Republican senators signed an open letter to Tehran warning that any potential deal with President Obama could be scrapped. 47 senators have sealed the letter, stressing that international agreements need approval from Congress. They point out that President Obama will leave office in January 2017 and that any deal without congressional approval would be merely an executive agreement that could easily be revoked in the future. The Iranian government dismissed the letter as propaganda ploy, while the White House has blasted the move.
I think it's somewhat ironic to see some members of Congress wanting to make common cause with the hardliners in Iran. It's an unusual coalition.
This type of letter, signed by dozens of members of Congress, undermines our efforts and what the ability of the commander-in-chief and the executive branch is.
I would describe this letter as the continuation of a partisan strategy to undermine the president's ability to conduct foreign policy and advance our national security interests around the globe.
The Republicans seem to have been inspired by the Israeli Prime Minister's passionate address to U.S. lawmakers, warning against any collaboration with Iran.
Iran has proven time and again that it cannot be trusted. This regime will always be an enemy of America.
In the meantime, an array of challenges lie ahead of the end of March deadline for Iran to agree cuts to its atomic program in exchange for lifting sanctions. The US Secretary of State will meet his Iranian counterpart later this week for the next round of talks. Tom Hartman sought the Republicans' perspective on the negotiation process and RT's The Big Picture.
This is the first time in the history of the Republic that an opposition party, for domestic political purposes, has participated. Can you imagine if you know, when FDR was planning on or was fighting Hitler in World War II, if some Republican, one of the guys who didn't want us to take on Hitler, there's a whole book full of them, in the U.S. House and Senate, if they had if they had published an open letter to Adolf Hitler that said, FDR might beat you, but just hang around, don't commit suicide, we'll make it all good.
We're talking about a deal that will outlive the next possibly 2 or even 3 presidencies. So it's right and proper to point out that a subsequent president absolutely can overturn this. It's incredibly important. Look, Tom, the bottom line is, Americans don't want this bill. 84% of Americans oppose this deal. Congress, for all its faults, is still the people's body. There's a negotiation on the table, and where it currently is totally out of step with where the American people want it to be.
You don't know where it currently is. It's secret.
71.
And it's not just the United States. It's the United States plus 5 European countries.
We know.
You guys are not just disrespecting the United States.
And what the American people know, 71% of them, including almost 60% of Democrats, think that this deal will allow the Iranians to eventually have a nuclear bomb. That is the
That's because they've been listening to bombast from people like you, which is not founded in reality.
The Republicans' move appears to be rare, direct congressional interference in diplomatic negotiations. Foreign policy expert Robert Neyman believes the letter is more aimed at delivering a message within the U.S. rather than outside.
They want to blow up the talks, and they're in a kind of panic because the belief is spreading that the U.S. and Iran and the other partners in the negotiation are close to a deal. These moves are looking increasingly like grandstanding and like a cartoon that's more about the 2016 Republican presidential election, more for show like that, than actually directed at changing the outcome of the negotiations.
Breaking news for you. A magnitude 6.9 earthquake struck off the coast of Iwate Prefecture in northeastern Japan at 8:06 Japan time on Tuesday. The Japan Meteorological Agency is warning of a 1-meter tsunami. It is approaching Iwate Prefecture. Anyone in that area should listen to local authorities and disaster management officials for information and instructions. JMA is calling on people in the area where the tsunami advisory is issued to leave coastal areas or riversides immediately. The agency says people in those areas should evacuate to a safer place, such as a high ground or an evacuation building. When tsunami hits, it may cause serious damage. Tsunami will hit repeatedly. Do not leave the safe place until the warning is cleared. JMA is calling on people in the area where the tsunami warning is issued to leave coastal areas or riversides immediately. The agency is telling them to evacuate to a safer place, such as high ground or an evacuation building. Damage due to tsunami is expected. Tsunami will hit repeatedly. Do not leave the safe place until the warning is cleared. Once again, this breaking news coming into us. A magnitude 6.9 earthquake struck off the coast of Iwate Prefecture in northeastern Japan at 8:06 Japan time on Tuesday. The Japan Meteorological Agency is warning of a 1-meter tsunami approaching Iwate Prefecture. People in areas around the coastline should evacuate to high ground. Please listen to local authorities. We'll bring you more.
Wow, look at Japan just got hit with a 6.9. I was looking at the quakes here yesterday. They had some pretty deep 5-pointers. And then way down right here by the South Sandwich Islands, they had a 6.2 earlier, and that was shallow. That was only 10 kilometers. Here's the map scale down here. This is 200 miles down here on the left. And, well, another one just popped up. Now they're saying there's two, 6.9 and a 6.8. But that 200-mile scale, Fukushima is right in here. So it's less than that, but they have other nuke plants. Here's this Onagawa, and then up here there's one. I don't know why these are in red, if they're having troubles with both of them. Okay, the 6.8, that was closer to land. And they issued some tsunami statements here. And it looks like they issued about 3 or 4 statements. 5, and there's no warnings or watches in it. But looking at the buoy map, you can see there's actually 3 buoys going off here. The first buoy shows about a 1-meter deviation, and the second buoy is showing about a 1 meter as it gets towards the end here. And the third buoy is about the same. It builds up to about 1 meter, 5125, 20. 512420 is down here. And here's a picture of that buoy. It's owned and maintained by the Japanese Meteorological Agency. Here's the ARSO map. It's going off too. And I was looking at this. It looks like a volcano, but it's actually in Hawaii. It's these jellyfish. 84 beachgoers got stung by jellyfish, and they were saying that they were kind of surprised that they were showing up at this time of the year. And then if you look down here on the ARSO map, this is the one by the South Sandwich Islands. And then looking at their list, they have 6.9, 6.8, 6.9. They happen all at the same time, the readings. And then here's a 6.9 in Japan. That happened an hour earlier. And then this is the South Sandwich Islands. They had a 6.7 down here, and then 2 more an hour later. And then Hawaii's had a little activity. I noticed yesterday there were about 5 5-pointers, and they were all really deep. So I was kind of expecting maybe a big one to happen down here. Hopefully nothing got damaged, and we don't have another nuke plant bleeding out into the Pacific, messing everything up. It's the last thing we need. Everyone have a good President's Day. Aloha.
昨日聞いた話だと4ヶ月の娘さんと奥さんがやっぱ津波で流されちゃって、お父さんがいて、で避難所で暮らしてて、もう完全にもう意気消沈してるっていうか、もうすごい暗くなっちゃってて、どうしたらね、そういう人たちが本当に いつも通りの生活取り戻して元気になれるのかっていうところでね。
津波で教会が全部流されてしまったシーサイドバイブルチャペルのノア。彼もやはり無力さを感じていました。彼は会うすべての人に何か必要なものはないかと聞いたりしていました。
柔軟剤と洗剤。
じゃあ洗剤持ってきますよ。
ね、洗剤柔軟剤。
教会関係で結構その物資とか入ってきて、それをね持ってくることができる。
あ、そうなんですか。なんかね、自分で買ってねと言われたけど。
あ、どうでした。洗剤とかありました。洗剤と柔軟剤。
しかしやはり一人では洗剤一つ運んでくることさえも難しく見えます。何も残っていないこの瓦礫の中でどこから何を始めればよいのか目処が立ちません。この荒野のような場所でノアはとても小さく見えました。
正直言うとですね、何を話していいかわからないです。その気持ちをわからないというか、僕がなんていうか声をかけていいのだろうか。皆さんに会いたくて来ました。手を握ってやってくださってありがとうございます。こんなに小さな僕だけど、君のために何かできるかな。終わらない争いの海へ会いに行くよ、会いに行くよ。どうも。また会いに行く。
文子おばあさんは膝が痛くて眠れないと私たちに会った途端泣き出しました。
膝当たりやすことができますから信じます。久美子さんも本当にあなたに祈り続けることができます。
何もできない私たちはただおばあさんの膝をさすり、神様に痛みを取り除いてくださいと願うしかできなかったのです。
決してあなたは久美子さんを離れることなく。
そこで驚くようなことが起きてしまいました。おばあさんの膝の痛みが消えてしまったのです。
運動もできるよ。
本当だよ。
だって病院のお医者さん来ても治んなかった。
でも本当うちらが手を置いたけど、ここの手はうちらの手の力じゃないよ。イエス様の手だからね。お母さん本当に神様に感謝だね。あ、みんなそう。
膝つけないから私は。
文子おばあさんの膝が癒されると、隣にいたサクさんも膝が痛いと私たちを呼びました。
このままこれ以上交通
痛いね。それ
交通事故4回やってからはダメよ。
事故4回？
だからダメできないの。
お母さん、お母さん、痛くない？
痛くない。
すごい。
痛くないね。すごすぎる。すごい。
あーすごい。
ちょっと教えてあげて。
なんで？
なんで治ったか。お母さん。
すごすぎる。ちょっと。
楽しいね。
楽しいね。
治るば痛い、治るだね。楽しいね。
楽しすぎるねこれ。
初めは絶対に治らないと祈りを拒否していたサクさんも、 文子おばあさんのことを見て共に祈りを始めました。賛美をしているある瞬間、サクさんの片方の膝の痛みが消えました。
あ、ウフができなかった。
できなかったの。こっちもできなかった。こうやって。
もっとじゃん。証拠証拠。はい、3日ウフ。
やった。嬉しい。可愛い。ああ、もう出たでしょ、サクさん。あれ、やだ。可愛い、可愛い。
ほら。
痛みがすっかりなくなった文子おばあさんはイエス様の愛を受け入れました。
私のために十字架で死んでくださいました。そして蘇られました。見たことあるよ。
顔知らない。
イエス様？
顔。
避難所にいる子どもたちはイエス様が誰なのかと聞いてきました。そしてイエス様が共にいてくださるようにと祈りを捧げました。
どうぞ光の子として。
どうぞ光の子として
用いてください。
用いてください。
イエス様の
イエス様の
名前によって祈ります。
祈ります。アーメン。
地震から2ヶ月が経ちました。今やっとここに建てられた十字架の意味が少し分かってきた気がします。家族を失った人々、彼らの心を神様が一番よくご存知でおられます。なぜならばその方はこの地を、この日本を愛され、ご自身の一人しかいない家族、その一人子を十字架上で殺し、私たちと永遠の契約を結ばれたからです。ノアには新しい建物が与えられました。
ここが新しい小さいのバイブルチャペルでございます。
新しい礼拝堂を紹介するノアの顔から明るい微笑みが止まりません。
めっちゃいいとこでしょ。ここ本当にその2日前に鍵もらってちょっと準備して、でイースターの礼拝がここでしたみたいな感じで、8年前に書かれた予言の絵らしいんですけど、誰に聞いたんだっけな。日本列島が水でこうグローバルミッションセンターでやって神様が手を広げて微笑んでるんですよね。それでね、一番驚いたのがこの十字架が、黄金の十字架宮城だって言うんですよ。ね、なんか分からんですけどね、嬉しいですよね。みんながこうやって日本でみんな祈ってて、
様に大きな拍手をしましょう。主を感謝します。
九死に一生を得たドライバーの男性は、
飯岡漁港の付近に差し掛かった時にコーナーを曲がった状況で、曲がったらもう波の壁が隣に見えたっていう状況です。波の壁がもう曲がった瞬間に見えたんですが、その時点ではもう、走るしかなかったんですね。そのもう最中に車が波に巻き込まれたっていう状況で、波が増えて、もう車が浮いた状態ですね。浮いて、もうその状況でもうパニックになりまして、水かさが最大多分2メートル近くまでなったと思うんですけど、その状態で出れば流されちゃうと思ったんで、まあ、少し収まるのを待つしかないっていう。
It's Friday, March 11th. I'm Miki Yamamoto in Tokyo. On this day in 2011, a massive earthquake and tsunami hit northeastern Japan. Huge waves destroyed communities along the country's Pacific coast. In this hour, we bring you special coverage in our series, Journey from Disaster. We'll take you live to the memorial ceremony in Tokyo for a moment of silence at 2:46 p.m., the exact time the quake struck. The magnitude 9 quake was the worst in Japan's recorded history, and its effects are still being felt today. The quake triggered a triple meltdown at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant and spread highly radioactive materials over a wide area. Efforts to decommission the plant are expected to take 40 years. The damage from the tsunami and earthquake has been enormous. Nearly 16,000 people died, and after 5 years, more than 2,500 are still missing. Some 470,000 people were forced from their homes. Over 170,000 remain in temporary housing. Rikuzen Takata was one of the towns most heavily damaged by the tsunami. This is Rikuzen Takata today. In 2011, a towering wave moved in this direction. The center of the town was right about here. The tsunami washed away the main part of the town. Today, NHK World's Minori Takao is standing by in Rikuzen Takata. Minori, tell us what's going on there today.
Miki, it has been a solemn day here in Rikuzen Takata. We just saw hundreds of people filing into the community hall where a memorial ceremony is taking place. It just got underway a few minutes ago. Most of the people who are inside attending are those who lost family members. It is the first time an official ceremony is being held here because the hall itself was completed just last spring. And just minutes from now at 2:46 p.m., the exact time the quake struck, we will be observing a moment of silence here to pray for the victims of the disaster. Now, Rikuzen Takata had a population of about 24,000 people, but because of the disaster, about 1,800 of them died or went missing. Now, here's a look at what the city looked like before the disaster. The coastline boasted a beautiful beach and 70,000 pine trees that attracted tourists from across the country. The city center was near the bay and packed with shops, schools, and neighborhoods. But then, all of that changed on March 11th, 2011. Waves as high as 17 meters gushed inland, wiping everything out. And of the pine grove by the coast, only one tree was left standing. Over the past 5 years, thousands of Rikuzen Takata's residents have lived in temporary housing. Recovery efforts are being made to rebuild infrastructure, but it's been a gradual process. Tons of soil is being piled up around the coast in order to elevate the land to prevent future disasters, but it will take another few years for this to be completed. Now, while the focus has seemed to be on the future, we have to remember that today it is about the people who were lost and the people who lost loved ones. A large tent has been created on the grounds of this community hall today, especially for another ceremony being held here. People, not just from Rikuzen Takata, have gathered from across the country, and they are paying their respects today at 2:46 p.m. Here, too, we will be observing a moment of silence. I will be bringing you that moment, and we'll be sharing the stories of some of those who have gathered here today. Back to you.
Thank you, Minori. Now, thriving communities need stable populations and businesses to serve them, but reconstruction in the disaster area has taken longer than expected. That means residents and business alike are finding it difficult to plan for the future. NHK World's Chie Yamagishi explains.
This prefab shelter has been Hideo Karino's home for nearly 5 years. The thin-walled two-room box is very big enough for Karino and his wife, Mariko.
It's a really tight squeeze.
The Karinos once lived with their son, his wife, and their 3 children in a 2-story house.
This was our old house.
The tsunami destroyed it. There were no temporary units available for large families, so they were forced to split up. In coastal areas, flat ground at higher elevations is in short supply. Municipal officials decided to create new residential sites higher up and far from the sea. But all that takes time. Officials have to draft relocation plans, identify landowners, and gain their consent. Fewer than 100 of the nearly 500 homes planned in this town have been completed. Karino recently paid a visit to a couple who just moved into their new home.
Our new house feels spacious since the temporary unit was so small.
There's no room to stretch out in those cramped prefabs.
Site preparation has just begun on the plot where the Karino family's new house is supposed to be built. They've been told actual construction won't begin for another 2 years. Many residents of temporary units have gotten tired of waiting and moved away. Karino feels anxious about his family's future.
It's been a long time, too long.
Rebuilding businesses lost in the tsunami has also been a difficult process. This temporary shopping district in the town of Minami Sanriku opened a year after the disaster. It has 32 shops. Mitsuru Oikawa runs a restaurant here.
Time really flew at first because I was working so hard.
Government built these structures soon after the disaster. Businesses were initially offered free rent. Next spring, a permanent shopping mall will be built on higher ground. But with the town's population shrinking, some people wonder where the customers will come from.
I've been running this business for over 4 years, and I feel like I've had fewer customers every year.
30% of the town's residents have left. Oikawa has doubts about moving to the new mall. Oikawa and other shop owners are carefully considering their options.
We should talk about how to expand our market and gain new customers.
There will be no subsidies at the permanent facility. Tenants will have to pay a security deposit as well as rent.
We'll be treated like ordinary tenants there. We'll have to pay rent, which will quadruple our operating costs.
The new mall is scheduled to open in 1 year's time. Oikawa and others are worried about how many of the residents will choose to remain. Chie Yamagishi, NHK World.
The damage from the disaster was not just physical, it's also left deep psychological scars on the people who survived. And for some, the passage of time has only made things worse and added to their stress. They've spent 5 years struggling to find meaning in life. NHK World's Yoshiko Nakata reports.
64-year-old Kazuya Shizukuishi lives alone in a temporary shelter in the city of Ishinomaki. When the earthquake struck, Shizukuishi was not at home. The tsunami swept his house away. He lost the wife he adored and his 2 daughters and father. After the disaster, Shizukuishi began trying to put the pieces of his life back together. But over time, he sank into loneliness and despair.
I'm all alone. I've lived a full life until then, and all of a sudden I was left like this.
On this day, Shizukuishi has a visitor, a caseworker. Nobuyasu Takayanagi has been providing survivors with mental health care. Takayanagi says survivors sometimes have trouble expressing their feelings.
Even if they don't talk about their feelings or problems, the appearance of their living space can speak volumes. That's why I think it's important to go and talk to them face to face.
Takayanagi works for a private mental health care drop-in center. It was established by local psychiatrists 3 months after the disaster and is subsidized by local governments. The counseling records of the survivors reflect their growing desperation.
I have no courage, and I can't move forward. I'm a worthless human being.
I feel so lonely and sad. I want to die.
Some survivors who are moving from temporary shelters to public housing could end up feeling even more isolated. 77-year-old Akifumi Oguro is one such person. His house was completely destroyed in the tsunami, and his wife passed away the following year. Last August, Oguro moved to this new apartment complex, but he feels lonelier now.
When I was in the temporary unit, I could hear the sounds of people nearby. They would make noise as they went past and ask me how I was doing. Here, things are different. I'm sealed in. It's scary just being here. I wonder what would happen if I collapsed.
In February, Oguro attended a monthly gathering with the encouragement of staff members at the mental health center. It brought together 21 men who now live alone. Many, like Oguro, had shut themselves up at home.
I'm not much of a talker, but when I come here, I can chat. I think it's a good place, and I like coming here.
There is more to recovery than putting up buildings. I think it also means creating environments where people can regain the things they've lost, such as communicating with others and the sense of belonging to a community.
Shizukuishi says time alone won't ease his sense of loss, but he says he found one important reason to keep going.
As long as I live, I'll keep my family's memory alive and tend to their graves. That's my mission as a person who was left alive. I don't know how long I'll live, but I'll do it as long as I can.
The passage of time means nothing to survivors trying to come to terms with their ordeal, but a community of caring people could provide one important way to help them move forward.
Now, let's go back to Minori Takao in Rikuzen Takata, a city hard hit by the disaster. Minori, how did people there mark 2:46 p.m.?
Yes, Mickey, exactly at that time we heard a siren go off throughout the city. It resonated, and at that moment, people bowed their heads, put their hands together in prayer, and we saw many people in tears. One of the women I was able to speak to told me that she came to this ceremony with her 2 nieces. These girls had lost their mother. This is the woman's sister. And over the past 5 years, not once did they say anything weak. But just recently at the dinner table, the two girls all of a sudden said, "Wouldn't it be so nice if we could eat Mother's cooking just one more time?" So even after 5 years, people are really still coming to terms with what they've lost. And the service is still going on inside this hall. The city office, of course, hopes to continue to hold the ceremony here because it has so much meaning. The place in front of you, called the Singapore Hall, is named after the country because of the donations that were collected from the people there. It helped to build this place. And of course, a lot of support has poured in to the tsunami hit region from across the globe. And every time I go anywhere in the Tohoku area, people tell me how grateful they are of the support they've received, and they want to say so through NHK World. All that is adding to the momentum of the recovery efforts here. This is a diorama on display of what the city center will look like in 3 years' time. At the center is a major shopping area, and this will start construction this summer. So such visible signs of moving forward will hopefully give residents a clearer picture of what their future will look like. The past 5 years has been a time of sorrow and a test of patience. And of course, the challenges are far from over, but people in this community, people I've talked to, tell me they're not about to let their community fall apart. Back to you.
Thank you, Minori. Minori Takao in Rikuzen Takata. Now in the studio, we have Newsline's editor-in-chief, Miki Ebara. Miki, I'd like to turn our eyes with you now to the enormous support Japan got from overseas in the aftermath of the disaster. I recall it was very quick and overwhelming.
Yes, that's right. The speed and the scale of international assistance were both unprecedented. I was going through a list of which countries sent what to Japan at the time, and just the list is amazing. More than 20 countries dispatched either search and rescue or medical teams to Japan. About half of them arrived within 3 days of the earthquake. South Korean and Singaporean teams were here already the next day. And of course, we remember the Tomodachi operation of the U.S. military, and goods such as food, water, generators, and blankets came to shelters. Over 160 countries and international organizations sent all this assistance. And cash donations totaled to $80 million, but that came through only government channels. So if you want to include what came through private or individual channels, we don't know. We simply don't know the amount. And the help wasn't only for emergency response, but infrastructures, such as where Minori was reporting from, the community hall in Rikuzen Takada is called Singapore Hall because they got so much donations from that country. And in Minami Sanriku, almost half of the funds to build a new hospital came from Taiwan. And a new fish processing facility in the town of Onagawa was built thanks to a donation from Qatar. So just the list is so long and goes on.
Yes, many victims have told us that they were so heartwarming and encouraging in a time where there was nothing more than despair and loss. So what do you think we can learn from these experiences?
I think we can say that until 5 years ago, Japan had been one of the helpers and not of the helped. But after this disaster, we now know what sort of help is really needed when such a disaster strikes. And I think what's most important is many of us now understand how people feel when they are hit by such a disaster, that it takes time to heal, that it needs gentle and reaching hands of others to stand up again and to rehabilitate. There's increasing attention on the need for mental health and psychological support during and after emergency situations around the world, be it disasters or war, so Japan can share its experience. We also know now the huge role of volunteers play what they can play in the process of recovery. Even after 5 years, volunteers, including foreign nationals, go back to the affected region. In the beginning, they helped with the cleanup or delivering food, but over the period, they've become friends with the locals, and some go there to give moral support, which sometimes can be more important than material assistance.
Well, talking about making friends, you have reported about some special bonds being created between Japan and other countries.
Well, there were about 30 foreigners who lost their lives in the disaster, including 2 young Americans. And I recently interviewed the bereaved families and friends. Members of both their families have been back to the affected region many times and been helping local children's education or student exchanges and continuing the legacy of the loved ones, both of whom happen to be working as English teachers. And I'm sure there are countless other cases like this happening across Japan. The 3/11 disaster did horrific damage to thousands of people in Japan, but it's also true that many positive things, such as new friendship or new cooperation between people have come into being. And that, I think, is giving strength to the affected region and beyond.
Thank you, Miki. Newsline's Editor-in-Chief, Miki Ebara. Now, as we come to the end of our series, Journey from Disaster, we bring you some messages from survivors and families of victims.
I feel stuck. It's already been 5 years, but on the other hand, it's only been 5 years.
We have to be careful not to rebuild our region in the wrong way. We're responsible for building a foundation and handing it over to future generations with a sense of hope.
I still live in temporary housing. Reconstruction is still in progress. I hope we can make our town even better than before, with the help from people from across the country and overseas.
Absolutely grateful to the people of Ricas and Takata for accepting Monty as a member of their families and as a friend, and they gave him a second home, and I have a lot of peace knowing that he was not alone.
5 years of thanks for remembering our daughter Taylor, for giving time, money, letters, prayers to us for our healing.
I think we're partway back to the life that we had before the disaster, although a lot of things are still not like before. But our family is getting by. It's good.
We've received heartfelt support from all over the world, which helped us live through each day. I feel nothing but gratitude.
I just want to keep moving forward. Right now, I'm full of vitality, driving myself ahead.
Everybody got some rather breaking news coming out of Japan. Another megaquake, a 7.0 earthquake, struck just about 18 minutes ago, and it occurred near Fukushima, Kyushu, Japan. Now, the seismologists are reviewing this. There has been no word as far as mainstream media coming out. It just hit Twitter. And I'm right here looking at the USGS site right now, and they're giving tips about what to expect with the aftershocks, secondary waves, fires, possibly, all of that good stuff. Like I said, it just got posted. The Weather Channel, just about 4 minutes ago, has now also come out with news that the major 7.0 major earthquake. Now, it appears that it may be off the coast of Japan, west-southwest of Makurazaki, Japan. Now, whether that is going to translate into there is damage, or there's going to be damage, or even a tsunami, that is still yet to be seen. This, like I said, this is pretty much brand new information just coming out. So as far as tsunamis and warnings and all that stuff, we're just going to have to see how this plays out, and I can keep abreast of more information as it's breaking. All right, thanks everybody.